this series called Intentionality. And so we started off this last week and we said, hey, well, let's just start the whole year off with this idea of what would our lives look like if we were to make 2016 our most intentional year ever. How could our lives be better? How could our lives be significant if we were to be people that we would say, hey, let's make this the year that we're going to be intentional right off the bat. And so we looked and we said, hey, new year, we look at new hopes and we look at new dreams and we see all the possibilities of what could be. And whenever we see that it's easy to start thinking that I can and I could and I should and I might. But we have to dismiss those. And we have to have the singular thought of, I will. That I will. Instead of thinking about what could be, we're going to start thinking about what we will be and what we will do. Last week we talked about be aware. Be aware that awareness is important for us to be aware of what's going on in people's lives. What is it that's happening with them? How can we celebrate with them? And where do we just need to weep with them? And where do we just need to hug on them and love them and just be still and be silent with them? Because we're going to be aware. So we looked at this idea of love and that what love demands presence. That we would be present with people. Our presence. But love doesn't always require the gift of a present. But it always requires presence. And then when it comes to having these healthy relationships, that if we're going to have healthy relationships, if we're going to take these people that we care about the most, two of the things that we're going to need to make sure that we have with them is we're going to have to be present and we're going to have to be aware. Because healthy relationships have our presence and our awareness with them. So we're going to be looking at this idea of intentionality and seeing what is it that we should be looking at and beginning to narrow the focus on what we're going to do with our life. And let's think about 2016, the best way that we can possibly think about how to live our lives. So this week we're going to talk about be square. Well, I was a teenager in the 80s. And so being a teenager in the 80s, certainly there's some good memories. There's some things that I'm glad that I missed. Like, I'm glad that we got past the whole disco scene by the time the 80s rolled around and I was a teenager. So I was grateful that we missed out on that side of things. But I just remember there's just some standout things that come to mind when it comes to the 80s. The big hair, the big poofy hair. I certainly remember that. I remember going on dates, and that my dates, their shoulders were so much broader than mine. Remember those big old foam pads that they would put in their shoulder? I mean, it was just like, what, you want to be a football player or what? I just remember that from the 80s. I love that the 80s was like the whole introduction and the movement of pop music. That's where it just kind of came along and came alive. And, we still got pop with us today. So that's kind of cool. And it's still being modern and coming out new. But I remember a song that was so countercultural that made it so big. And it was just like, that's just kind of weird that could be a song that would really make it because it's so countercultural to who we are as a society. And the song was Hip to be Square. Hip to be Square. Huey Lewis in the News, Hip to be Square. It was great, and I kind of felt like, hey, that's cool, because I kind of lived a square life. That's just I was a little nerdy kid that did that. So I kind of liked that song, and it was cool, and I just gravitated to it, because it was hip to be square. And so today we're going to talk about be square, and I know that some of you guys are thinking, oh, really? I was really deciding on whether I was going to come to church or not today, and you're going to give a message on morality. I really wish I wasn't here. I would like to have skipped this one. Well, we're not going to talk about morality this morning. Instead, the moral of today's talk is going to be your schedule. That's the moral of today's talk. I remember 25 years ago when I just was stepping into ministry, that as I was observing and seeing different people, some in ministry and just other people that just looked like they were important people and looked like they had their act together, and just watching and observing them, they all had something that I didn't have. And I wanted to feel important. I certainly wanted to look important in case I wasn't. And so I was going, what could I do? And so as I noticed something that was a common thread for all of them that I was looking at and going, hey, you look really important, I decided that there was something I could get to make me look important. And so I bought a daily planner. I bought one of those. It was a little case and folded up, mine zipped. And I had one of those, and I would just carry it with me everywhere I went. I was young, and when I was in my early 20s, I could remember everything. I don't know what it is about, you're a teenager, and it seems like you can't remember anything. At least that's what our parents are always telling us, right? And then you get to your 20s and you get out there on your own, and all of a sudden you're like, mine's just like steel trap, and I can just kind of remember all of these details. And now that I'm in my late 40s, it's kind of like being a teenager again, because I can't remember anything. And so I have to put it all down and write it down. But I remember having that planner, and I remember going to different meetings and meeting with different volunteers, and volunteers that were, some of them were in their 30s, but some of them were the age that I am now. And we'd have a meeting, and we'd be talking about what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. And they'd get out a pen, and they'd just start writing it down. I had my planner with me, and it was just sitting there, and I watched them, and I was like, oh. And I'd unzip it and open it up, and I'd write in there, find that square that it needed to go in. I'd close it back up. I'd never go back and look at that thing for what I needed to do, when I needed to do it, because I really could. I could remember it all. I could manage it all. But I was single. I had one thing to be doing, and it was my ministry, and I could just keep it all in place in my head. And so I just never had to refer to it. But now I live by a calendar. I couldn't imagine living life without one. In fact, when it comes to calendars, every calendar I've ever interacted with has one thing in common. Whether it's the calendar that is the family planning calendar that kind of sits in the kitchen, or whether it's the old school calendar that you just got a gift for because the business said, hey, look, New Year's coming, and they're just kind of giving you the gifts. Whether it's the planner that sits on your desk that just has that whole month laid out, really big squares, and then you got all the little ones for the whole entire year down below. Whether it's your phone, whether it's your iPad, whether it's your computer, the one thing that they all have in common, even my little checkbook register that comes with it, a little calendar for 3 years, they all have one thing in common. And what they all have in common with every calendar I've ever interacted with is they all have squares. They've all got these squares. Some of them are really small, and the only thing you can fit in there is the number of the day that it is. And then some of them, that number just occupies just a little tiny corner. And then there's a big square that you can take, and you can write inside of that square. And you can write all the things that you've got going on or you're planning for that day. It's the calendars. And so we're going to talk about schedules today, because I think when it comes to our lives, if we're going to be intentional and if we're going to make the most of it, then we're going to have to be square. And it seems like for some of our squares, we need squares for our squares, because we got so much that we're trying to pack into some of our squares. That I actually know some people that when it comes to their schedule and their commitments and all the things they've got going on, I don't even think that they could put dental floss in between their schedule, between their commitments, because of how tight it is. In fact, if I were to ask you this morning, have you ever been overscheduled? Yeah, exactly. That your faces are giving it away. Some of your voices are giving it away. And it's like, yes, I have been overscheduled. I know what it is to be overscheduled. It is this resounding yes that just pushes all the air out of you, and you just feel the exhaustion just by answering the question. Because we do. We know what it's like to be overscheduled, and we've experienced it, and we've experienced it too many times. And I've got some news for you that it's not flattering. I've got some news for you, and it's not encouraging. It's not the news that we're like going, oh, I'm so glad that I heard that and that I know that. You see, you think that you're the victim in your schedule. That you look at your life, if you're like me, and we go, hey, you know what? I'm just a victim here. But you see, we are the victims of our overcommitment. We're the victims. We're the victims of our overcommitments. And it's our overcommitments that we're a victim of. See, we might want to assign blame and go, yeah, it's my boss. If my boss didn't demand so much of me, then I'd have more time. Or we might be going, oh, it's my spouse. No, the honey-do list is just too big, and I just don't have any time. We might want to point and assign blame to, it's our kids and all the things that they're involved in and all the things that they're doing, and it's them. Or it might be, the team that we've chosen to be part of for extracurricular. It might be the education that we're pursuing that we might want to say and assign blame and say it's that. But it's us. Because the news is that you're the captain of your calendar. You are. That for you, you're the skipper of your schedule. That's the way you could think about it. That when it comes to who we are and what's going on with our schedules, you're the admiral of your appointments. That it comes down to you. And you're the one that's making the commitments of, hey, what's the career that I want? What's the organization I want to work for? Hey, what is it that we're going to allow our kids to be involved in and be part of? What am I going to do about pursuing education? What am I going to do about some extracurricular activities I want to do? What am I going to do with my volunteer life? We are in charge of our schedule. It's us. It comes and it lands and it falls on us. And we run ourselves ragged. We run ourselves ragged to the point until we have to come up for air. And we come up for air. And when we finally come up for air and we take a breath, we go, I got to do something about this. We come to our senses and we go, I can't keep this up. I've got to change something. I've got to do something different with my schedule. And what I see happen too many times is this. I see people that start to clean up their schedule and their commitments, and they start dropping the commitments that matter most. And they hold on to the commitments that matter least. That they don't stop and take and look and focus on their life and go, what's going to make the biggest difference? What's going to make the biggest impact? They don't stop and do that. They're just trying to catch air. And they start clearing off their calendar, but they drop so many things that matter so much. You see, our life, our schedule, it's made up of a series of boxes. And there's things that we put in our boxes. That church is one of the things that gets put in our box. And if you're here this morning, then you get a little star by your square today because you made it to church. But if you're listening online, if you're watching this online, it's because maybe you were too busy that you couldn't be here, but you knew it was important enough that you still wanted to get in and you still wanted to get it. And that's great. And we're glad you've done that. But church is just one piece. Then there's your personal God time that needs to be a priority, and it belongs in a square for you. That you've got to put that down. It's got to be part of your intentional schedule. That if you're dating somebody, that you make that part of the square going, I want to make sure I'm giving time to you, and you've got time for me, I hope too. And if you're married, your spouse. If you're a parent that's got kids in the home, that you want to be giving time to those kids. If you're a grandparent, you start putting in your grandkids in your squares because you want to be able to spend time with your grandkids. If you're still working, that's going to be part of what goes into your square. Your extracurricular, your volunteer, the teams, the sports, your education you're pursuing. These are all things that belong in our squares. The appointments that we need with our doctor, whether it's because of a physical health thing or whether it's because of emotional health, that we need these squares and we need these appointments and we need to make sure that we are setting and protecting our schedule for what matters most. And yet some of these either barely fit or don't fit at all into some of your schedules. That your schedules, it's so tight and so full with other things that some of the things that matter most have the smallest space or no space in your squares. And if we're going to be intentional, if we're going to make 2016 our best year, then we're going to have to be intentional with our squares. We're going to have to make this a year that we're going to be square. And how do you decide how much time goes to different activities? How do you decide how much time do you give to different people? How do you decide how much time you're going to give to God? How do you do that? Here's something interesting to consider. How would the people in your life answer some pointed questions? That if you're married, how would your spouse answer this question? What level of importance does your spouse put on time spent with you? How would they answer that? That if you've got kids that are in the home and you're still raising them, not the kids that came back, the ones you're still raising. And if you still got them in your home, then how would they answer this question? What priorities do your parents put ahead of you? How would they answer that? That if you're part of a team, whether it's part of the team of what you do because you're still in school and you're part of that sports team, whether it's a work team, whether it's just an extracurricular, you're part of a team because it's just part of your fun and fitness. But how would your team answer the question of how committed is, and put your name in the blank, how committed is blank to teamwork? How would these questions be answered in your friends? Your friends. How would your friends answer this question? What are the top 4 priorities that you see in fill in the blank life? What are the top 4 priorities in Will's life? Because of what you observe and what you see and how you see him spending his time. How would these questions be answered? Because I can tell you what I think we want. I think we want all of these questions to be answered favorably. I think we want these questions to be answered in such a way that we feel good about the truth that was answered. I think that's what we all desire. But I think that maybe we've got some people in our life that deserve more than what we're giving them. That they deserve more. I think maybe God deserves more than what you're giving him. Whether it's family, whether it's your job, whether it's your friends. Do you have people in your life that deserve more of you? That deserve more of your time and more of your attention, more of your focus? And if you've got kids that you're raising, you've got little kids that you're raising, let me tell you this. Parenting, it offers little to no forgiveness in the regrets department. Little to no forgiveness in the regrets department. It's why we've got to be square. It's why we've got to get this down and go, how am I going to spend my time? How am I going to protect my time? So that the people that matter most in my life are getting the best of me and they're getting time from me. And here's a big idea. This is a big idea that you can't afford to miss this. That with intentionality, this idea right here, I think it could change your life. And this is the idea. A schedule is far less about what gets done, of what to get done, and far more about what to become. That's a schedule. The schedule is far less about what to get done and far more about what to become. That's the schedule. And what are you doing to schedule what to become? Are you being intentional with it? Being who you need to be, who you desire to be. Maybe as you hear this, maybe this is a question you're prepared for. What's the biggest barrier to your God-shaped life? What's your biggest barrier to your God-shaped life? That if your life was to be exactly how God would shape it to be, what's your biggest barrier to you taking on that shape and how you spend your time that makes your life? I'm going to share with you 3 common barriers between you and God's plan. 3 common barriers. 3 common barriers that I believe that these just keep happening over and over and over again in our lives. These are the barriers that are preventing us from completely experiencing God's shape, God's plan for our life. The first one, foolishness. It's foolishness. It's when we choose to act foolishly, that we live with no real strategy for the future. No solid foundation. We're just foolish, and we settle for doing things that fill our time, and they fill it now. But those things that we foolishly choose to fill our times with now are going to empty our hearts later. So that's foolishness. And it's one of the big barriers. It's one of the common barriers. Another one is lack of focus. It's lack of focus. Lacking this idea to say, I'm going to develop some tunnel vision to focus on the things that matter most. That we miss out on valuable opportunities with a lack of focus because we're distracted by less valuable activities. That we miss out on opportunities because we're doing some less valuable activities. That is a lack of focus. And I think a third one is thoughtlessness. It's thoughtlessness. That how many times did we tell ourselves or even audibly say to somebody else, oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. It just was never a thought. It was just, we never took the time to think through. It was just thoughtless is what we did and how we acted. We weren't thinking that God has a plan and a purpose for our lives and that we should be trying to live that out and make the most of it. So there's the barriers. And the barriers that are the things that end up blocking us. But what about the building blocks? What are the things that we could do to begin to build our lives the way that God would desire us to live out our life? What are some instructions to build a God-shaped life? I want to share with you 3. Now, these aren't original to me. I didn't come up with these. I didn't think these up on my own. But I've come across them before, and I thought those are important. Those are worth taking note of. Those are worth writing down. Those are worth even committing to memory. That if there were these 3 things that we could be doing to begin to build our life to where our life would be a God-shaped life, these 3 things could do it. Number 1, be careful how you live. Be careful how you live. That you would live in such a way that you exercise caution and you minimize regrets. Because you would be careful about how you live. That you're putting thought into it and you're going, I'm going to be careful. I'm going to make the best decision I can make. I'm going to be as wise as I know how to be. And I'm going to be careful how I live my life. Here's a second instruction. Make the most of every opportunity. Make the most of every opportunity. I'm talking about maximize your life. Now, I'm not talking about make the most of every opportunity in such a way that you go, hey, I'm kind of greedy and I want to do everything I can do to take care of me. No. Maximize your life. And if you're going to maximize your life, if you're going to make the most of every opportunity, then there are going to be countless people who love and respect you because of how you build their life, how you care for them, how you are there for them. Because it's making the most of every opportunity. And that's one of the instructions that if we're going to take and come along and build your God-shaped life, that's what you're going to have to do. And the third one is understand what the Lord wants you to do. Understand what the Lord wants you to do. That live out your full potential and purpose by spending time with God. Now, I know some of you guys, chances are you're new, and this is like a brand new experience for you today at Crosspoint. And maybe if you are, maybe for you really intended to be here last week, but you still hadn't gotten over the hangover, and so you didn't get to make it. You're still, your New Year's celebration just lasted. But you're here now, and that's great, and we're glad you're here. Maybe you're here and you're like going, no, that's not me. Well, but this is my first time here at Crosspoint, and you might be going, is this really a church? I mean, that music was nothing like I ever experienced before in a church, and they said 65 minutes, and we haven't even looked at the Bible. Is this really church? Well, let's look at the Bible. Because there's something I want you to see in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, verse 15, that I think is going to be worth our time to look at this morning. That's what it says. So be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Verse 16, check this out. Make the most of every opportunity. Isn't that a novel thought? Wish I'd have said that. Oh, I did earlier. That's where I got it, though. I'm showing my cards. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. Don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. So this is where we get this instruction. Where did these instructions come from of how to make the most of our God-shaped life? Right here. I just tricked you into listening to some advice without you even knowing it was in the Bible. And you were kind of, maybe some of you are going, hey, this guy's good. I like that. No, it's not me. But God's word sure is good. I'm just sharing with you what's in it. How would you spend your time if God were in charge of it? How would you spend your time if God were in charge of it? That if you were to say, hey, God, here's my calendar. Will you just kind of go ahead and set that and mark it out and just let me know how would your life be different? What would your schedule be like? How would you end up spending your time? Here's another question. Is your schedule working for you? Is your schedule working for you? You know, are you that person that you're sitting here today, this morning, and you're like going, this has been such an encouraging message. I feel so good about my life and everything that I've been doing because everything he has said, that's me. Or has it been more of well, I got some of that down. I'm doing good in some of that, but there's some intentionality that I've been missing out on, and I need to get more focused. And I need to make sure that I get more of these pieces in my life. Is your current schedule working for you? Is it protecting and strengthening your family life? Because that's one of the things that our schedules should be doing. That if you got little ones in your home right now, you can't be home too much. You can't. See, this is the time when they need our time. And they need as much of it as we're capable of giving it. And if we'll do a good job of giving them our time when they're young, then as they grow older, they'll still respect and love us. They'll still come to us. But if we don't do a good job of giving them gobs and gobs and gobs of our time when they're young, it's going to be a difficult road to overcome as they get older. Not impossible, but difficult. That's why we've got to be intentional. It's why we've got to look. It's why we have to evaluate. Is your schedule working for you? Is your schedule keeping your work life in check? Is your schedule keeping your work life in check? You know, and there's two different sides of this one for me. One side of it is your employer getting all that they're paying you for? Are you really tuned in? Are you really working for your company and your employer? Or maybe it's yourself that you work for, but are you really putting in the hours for what you're being paid to put in the hours for? That's one side. Or are you getting distracted and not really working the way that you really should be working, that you're not protecting your work schedule? Then there's the other side. And the other side is your work doesn't end when your work should end. And that you keep working and working and working, and it keeps squeezing out the people in your life that matter most. Is your schedule working for you? Because if it's not, then you need to reevaluate the squares and what's going in them and how you're going to manage your squares. We need to look at it. We need to make the most. That when it comes to our routine with what we do, we should be setting ourselves up to where the people that matter most get the best part of ourselves. And that we should be protecting that. See, it's going to take time investment. We have to invest time into people. It's our time investment that either reveals we really, really care about you, or it's the lack of our time investment that makes them question, do I really even matter? It's time. Time is the tool that they're using to measure what their worth is to you. And we have to look at time. Our schedules. That our squares should be protected in such a way that what we're doing within our squares of our day, that we're getting to grow closer to God. That our squares that we're protecting and what we're managing and laying out, they should be squares that are helping to build our family, not break our families down. Our squares are the tools that we set our life by. Let's make the most of these squares. See, I believe that filling in a square has the power to change your life for the better. But you got to choose to live by it. You have to be square and not just write in the square. See, it's hip to be square. And we must be square. Because the schedule is far less about what to do and it's far more about what to be. What it is that we are to become. Let's be intentionally square. Let's be intentionally square. Let's be careful how we live. Let's make the most of every opportunity. Let's understand what the Lord wants us to be. Let's be intentionally square in 2016. Pray with me. God, I thank you that you're a God that cares about us. I thank you that you're a God that you have instruction for us of what we could do. No, really what we should do. And I pray that this would be a year that it's going to be an I will year, and that we are leaving here knowing what we will do with our schedules to make the most of every opportunity. Jesus, it's in your name we pray.